Make sure that we really stick the landing with Trials. It's important that this doesn't go out half-baked.
Oh, Trials. That might be the most poorly aged comment that Bungie has ever made regarding Destiny, and we've had bombs like, they'll throw money at the screen, and our most rewarding event ever regarding the infamous 2 tokens and a blue. Simply put, Trials of Osiris in Destiny 2 is in an utterly abysmal state. The loot is incredibly stingy, the player population is laughably small, and the gameplay is ruined by 3-peakers and cheaters alike. If you can't get to 5 wins, Bungie sees fit to spit on the player with a single static reward each week. And for players that regularly go flawless, they've been handed Adept weapons that are basically no better than their non-Adept counterparts, making the incentive to go flawless next to 0. Hell, you aren't even guaranteed a simple Ascendant shard at the Lighthouse, despite it being more difficult and time-consuming than a Master or Grandmaster ordeal. And the token system with Saint 14, oh boy is it terrible, and a relic of Bungie's rewards designed circa Destiny 2 Year 1. The rollout of Trials in Destiny 2 didn't even bring with it new weapons or armor, instead being a rehash of gear over 4 years old. Not to mention the fact that they didn't even bring back that entire gear set. It is clear that Trials didn't just come out half-baked, it was dished out raw. But Trials doesn't have to stay this way. I believe that it can not only be saved, but brought to heights of which it has never seen before. In this video, I'm going to lay out how I would go about fixing this broken game mode. We're going to discuss how the base gameplay and matchmaking can be improved to make the mode more fun to play, and we'll also completely revamp the reward structure so that we make loot rain for everyone, no matter what your skill level is. And finally, we'll talk about how we can remake the Lighthouse into the sacred venue it once was back in Destiny 1. Let's jump in. So, before we dive into the loot overhauls that Trials so desperately needs, we need to first discuss how we can make the gameplay experience itself better. The most important change that Trials needs on this front is to move from card-based matchmaking to connection-based matchmaking. Now, about a year ago, an excellent content creator and friend of mine, Ascendant Nomad, made a video about how card-based matchmaking causes what is known as skill creep, and eventually causes the entire playlist to eat itself population-wise. So here's how it works. In the beginning, you have a population of players of all skill levels in Trials, with a majority of the population trending more to the lower end of the skill spectrum. With card-based matchmaking, soon after Trials launches, the teams that get 1 or 2 wins realize that they've hit their ceiling, and then they drop out due to them feeling it isn't worth their time to play. Then, teams that used to get 2 to 3 wins on average become the new bottom of the skill spectrum, and thus struggle to get wins themselves, and they then in turn dip out of the playlist. And the cycle continues and continues until all that's left are new players trying out the mode and the most hardcore Omega sweaty players, essentially creating 2 walled-off player bases. This causes the new players that are just trying out the mode to bail after a single card and never return. And on the other end of the spectrum, players that used to sleep their way to a flawless struggle to win any games at all. Instead, if we switch to connection-based matchmaking, every team has hope to go flawless on any given card. You might be a team that can only get 2 or 3 wins on average when the population is full. But if you get a lucky card, you might just match 7 teams in a row that can normally only win 1 or 2 games. This hope to go flawless would mean that more teams are willing to stick in the playlist and continue playing, meaning that the average amount of wins a team can achieve goes up and stays up, and it means that more people get to experience the higher tiers of loot and Trials. This becomes a positive feedback loop that keeps players in the playlist, as opposed to the eventual population death spiral caused by card-based matchmaking and skill creep. And you see, Trials hasn't always been card-based matchmaking. You can see how much better that connection-based matchmaking is at player retention over time by looking at the graph of player population in Trials during House of Wolves. Now, look at that same graph after Taken King, when the matchmaking was changed to be card-based, and you can see from that point onward, the player base was in constant decline, other than the temporary peaks when new content or DLCs dropped. This same downward player population trend is happening in D2's Trials of Osiris right now due to card-based matchmaking and the effects of skill creep. Now that we've got matchmaking taken care of, we need to discuss the biggest gameplay element that is ruining Trials, and that is third-person peeking. 3-peeking, as it's otherwise known, just completely stalls out the pace of play, and it turns matches into who wants to peek a lane first and risk death, instead of a fast-paced first-person shooter with incredible movement mechanics and crispy gunplay, making it to where if you end up winning a match with 3-peeking, it isn't even fun, considering you're basically watching paint dry. Now, there are two things that enable third-person peeking: swords and emotes. Let's talk about swords first, and what I would do is simple, but would be the most effective solution, and that is to simply lock out the usage of swords in Trials. Now, Bungie actually has a pretty ingenious and simple way of doing this, and it would take advantage of a system that has already existed within Destiny 2 before. Think back to the Leviathan Prestige raid layers, which had a restricted loadout system, in which, to even queue up the activity, you were banned from using certain gear. Bungie should re-leverage this to prevent you from being able to queue up for Trials if anyone in your fire team has a sword equipped. Then, once the Trials match starts, you would still be free to swap out all of your other weapons and armor if you wanted, but swords would be grayed out and unable to be equipped, similar to how you are not allowed to wield 2 exotic weapons at a time. So, think about it. Trials is anywhere from 5 to 9 rounds, and only one of those rounds provides heavy ammo. That means, at best, your heavy slot itself is only relevant for 20% of the match. In a prolonged game that goes the full 9 rounds, that heavy slot is only relevant for about 11% of the match. I think that it is completely justifiable to sacrifice sword usage, considering how irrelevant heavy weapons are as a whole to the game mode. This solution would mean that swords are left unchanged and the other 99% of Destiny, which is fantastic for players and even better for the devs as it minimizes the amount of work they have to do. Now, for emotes, I just think you either need to disable emotes until the end of rounds, until the end of the game, or just lock them out from usage entirely within Trials. I've seen it suggested to have emotes instead lock you in place for a fixed duration, but honestly, this would just make the rest of the game worse and would be pretty unintuitive to have your emotes lock you in place in Trials, but nowhere else. Just, I would pass on this. And honestly, with Trials being an in-game activity that only a small segment of the community engages with, I think it is completely justifiable to limit emote usage within the mode to make the gameplay experience much faster paced and a lot more fun. Now, there are a couple of other things that could drastically improve the gameplay experience and would be easy to implement. The first thing is something that Bungie has actually already done a very long time ago, and that is reduce round length down from 2 minutes to 1 minute 30 seconds apiece. This change would limit the impact of camping with high intellect in an attempt to win games with supers instead of, with your guns or your abilities. And Bungie realized that 2-minute rounds in super camping were a problem almost 4 years ago in the final days of D1's Trials of Osiris, when super camping with the memory of scory artifact was rampant. And what did they do? They reduced round length down to 1 minute and 30 seconds. Destiny 2's Trials needs this quality of life change as well. The next thing I would tackle is special ammo between rounds. And specifically, you should only get 2 rounds of special ammo at the start of every round, no matter what. Right now, though, if you win the round and pick up a special ammo brick, you can carry over that additional special ammo to the next round, meaning a sniper could have 6 rounds instead of the usual 2. This creates a snowballing effect that makes the earliest rounds the most important and makes it easier for one team to barrel over the other after round 1. And it goes without saying, but Bungie seriously needs to continue to ramp up their anti-cheat. I don't have much more to say about this, as I think we can pretty much all agree that cheaters completely ruin the game and they need to be dealt with. From my own experience at least, I have matched way less cheaters in Beyond Light than in the previous seasons, but still, even a single cheater being allowed to run rampant is a problem and can drive people away from the mode forever. At the very least, Bungie recently teamed up with Riot Games, and they have started sending cease and desist letters to cheating websites. We can only hope that Bungie will continue to be proactive on this front. And as we're getting to the end of this segment, you may be wondering, Kujay, how the hell have you not brought up stasis yet? It completely ruins PvP. Well, a couple weeks ago, we put out an extended video on how we could balance stasis for PvP without harming PvE. I'll put a link down in the description, but I'll mention the two major changes to stasis that I suggested there. The first one is that players can now instantly break out of any freeze at the trade-off of slightly increased breakout damage. The new defrost time would be 1 second, which is in line with our slowest killing primary weapons in the game. And then secondly, slowing would no longer affect weapon stats or accuracy, and would serve only to reduce player movement speed and reduce ability regeneration rates. And if you're wondering, but what about Shatter Dive? What about Behemoth Titan Super or Duskfield grenades? Well, go check out the video. It's 30 minutes long for a damn good reason, because we covered everything about stasis in it. Now, let's turn our eyes to loot. Now that we've talked about how we can make the base gameplay more fun, we need to tackle the biggest problem plaguing Trials: overly stingy loot systems. As I mentioned earlier in the video, if you're a player that isn't capable of getting up to 5 wins in a card, you're locked to a single static reward each week, because the weekly bounty and the 3-win milestone both grant the same reward, as well as a pittance of tokens. Because in your best case scenario, say you get to 4 wins, that means you're gonna get 1 token on games 1, 2, and 4, and then 6 tokens on your game 3, and you're gonna get 0 tokens on your losses, which would mean you would only earn 9 tokens. That isn't even half of the tokens you need for a single rank up reward from Saint 14. Bungie has the token payouts dramatically skewed to high win cards, with the token payout for a 4-win card being just 9 tokens, whereas a 7-win card balloons up to 37 tokens. A true rich get richer scheme. I believe that the basic reward structure for Trials needs to change dramatically and should shower players in loot just for participating, even those who struggle to win a single game. If you provide a great enough loot incentive for even the lowest skill tier of player, then you'll start to get a wider skill spectrum of teams playing Trials, as opposed to the current landscape of extremely sweaty veterans and new or less experienced teams that dip their toes in Trials for a card, get pummeled, and then never return. If you start to encourage a large base of low to average skill players in Trials, then achieving a flawless card becomes easier for everyone, thus giving more teams hope to keep grinding Trials and starting yet another positive feedback loop of maintaining and growing the Trials player base. So, to accomplish this, we've got to make some big changes. First, I would introduce a chance for a generic Trials engram to drop from any given Trials game. Win or lose, be it a Steamroll 5-0 win or getting ran over in an 0-5 loss. And this Trials engram would drop in a similar fashion to the old Tier 2 Reckoning system, in which you have a chance to receive a Trials engram after every game, with your drop chance increasing each game until it becomes a guaranteed drop on your 4th game in a row of not receiving a Trials engram. That way, as long as you're on the playlist, you're getting loot. The next thing I would do is then adjust how Trials awards tokens. I think that each game of Trials should always award some tokens. In this case, I would up it to 2 tokens per loss and 3 tokens per win, with 5 bonus tokens at the 3-win mark, 10 bonus tokens at the 5-win mark, and 15 bonus tokens at the 7-win mark. Under this new system, instead of the measly 9 tokens for a 4-win and 3-loss card, the token payout would jump up to a whopping 24 tokens. And at 7 wins, 3 losses, the token payout under the new system would jump up to 57 tokens compared to the old 37. And I would have the Passage of Wealth increase these values up to 3 tokens per loss and 5 tokens per win, with bonus token payouts of 10, 20, and then 30 at the 3, 5, and 7 win milestones. meaning you could get 39 tokens for a 4-win, 3-loss wealth card, and a massive 104 tokens for a 7-win, 3-loss card. Now, let's talk about the biggest change to the loot structure that I'd make, which would be the ability to bring your Trials engrams to Saint 14 and focus them in a similar fashion to the prismatic recaster seen during Season of Arrivals, with tokens serving as the focusing currency, similar to how Altered Element allowed you to focus Umbral engrams at the prismatic recaster. So, at a high level, here's how it would work. You would have 3 rows of focusing options. The first row is your basic free focusing options, being able to choose a guaranteed weapon or a guaranteed armor piece. The second row would be for focusing Trials engrams into specific weapons, and the third row would be for focusing Trials engrams into specific armor pieces. Now, considering the abysmal state of Trials' current loot structure, I would extend the max power cap of the original Trials gear set, such that it lasts until the end of Season 16. And yes, this would include any current Trials gear you own now. I wouldn't make anyone have to go regrind the same Astral Horizon that they may have already earned. Now, this would mean that there would be 2 relevant Trials gear sets to chase: the original Exile set and the new set that we're getting in Season 13, which I'm dubbing the Empress set, considering Kyaddle's arrival into the narrative. And by default, all the focusing options for the Exile gear set would be unlocked, since it's an old gear set, and the new Empress gear focusing options would require the player to unlock each one. So, let me walk you through how this would all work. By default, all players have the ability to focus a Trials engram into an Exile weapon or an Exile armor piece, with neither option requiring tokens. The free Empress focusing options would require you to first unlock at least one Empress weapon or armor piece. As you earn more Empress gear, the pool of these focused engrams would increase. For the weapon-specific and the armor-specific focusing options, the focusing cost would be 20 tokens. I feel that this is a pretty fair trade-off, as you could choose 2 random weapons or 1 guaranteed weapon of your choosing. For example, if you wanted to farm for the Summoner Auto Rifle, if you got the engrams and the tokens, farm away. And if you wanted to farm for the new Empress hand cannon, you would need to unlock that focusing option first. There would be 2 ways to do this. One, which is the old way, is to acquire the Empress hand cannon from the 3, 5, or 7-win reward milestones in a given week. Or 2, you could use a new currency that I'm dubbing as a Trials Talisman. Now, you would earn Trials Talismans from completing the endgame weekly Trials bounty. Instead of this bounty granting the week's 3-win reward, I would have it instead grant a Trials engram and a single Trials Talisman, meaning you could earn up to 3 Trials Talismans in a week if you complete the bounty on each character. For the final row of focusing options, you could farm out your desired Exile armor pieces, such as the sexy helmet, or you can instead choose to farm out the new Empress armor pieces after you have unlocked the focusing options, again, by either earning them from milestones or using Trials Talismans. It's important to note that these armor pieces would be high stat, just like Trials armor drops are right now. So this would mean you would have a great way to target farm for a specific armor piece to sex up and shore up your builds. In this system, players that go flawless on each character each week would be able to unlock all the focusing options within a couple of weeks. And for players that can only get a couple wins, you would be able to rely on the weekly bounty to unlock 3 focusing options each week. And here's the best part. You, as the player, would be able to choose the order in which you unlock the new Empress gear, as opposed to waiting on the right 3-win reward to come around. So if you want to go get that new hand cannon immediately, then you can go get it. Finally, I have a few more quality of life changes that I'd like to implement to truly transform Trials into the awesome activity that it deserves to be. The first thing I would do is to introduce a third option to use your tokens on at Saint 14, and that would be 20 tokens for a generic Trials engram that you could then go focus into a drop of your choosing. The second thing I would do is have it to where Trials tokens do not expire until the end of the current season. Right now, Trials tokens disappear at every weekly reset. The reason that Bungie does this is so you can't hoard thousands of tokens and get new Trials gear as soon as it comes out. However, Bungie's kind of established that new Trials gear only comes once per year, so I don't really see the point in having weekly token resets. I would instead suggest a wipe at the end of each season. That way you can't easily get new high stat, higher max power cap armor right at a season's start. And the final thing I would do is that I would have Trials weapons be upgraded into a new higher tier rarity status, becoming Pinnacle weapons. Now, I discussed how I would transform endgame weapons into Pinnacle and Adept weapons in my last video, in which I described a new Weapons 2.0 construct. I'll put the link for that down in the description, but the main takeaways for this would be that Trials weapons would now have the following attributes. They would have the ability to reroll the masterwork. They would have the ability to change the element of the weapon. They would then also have 2 choices in each of the final 2 trait slots. You would then also have the ability to re-roll one of the perk nodes on the gun. And finally, these new Pinnacle weapons would come with an additional intrinsic perk that is relevant to the activity in which the weapon was acquired, such as, say, celerity for our Trials weapons. And now that we've done a complete overhaul on the base loot structure for Trials, let's turn our eyes to the Lighthouse. All right, we have one last piece of business to take care of to make Trials a true endgame mode, the Lighthouse. Right now, upon visiting the Lighthouse, you receive 20 tokens, an Adept mod, and either an Adept weapon or an armor piece from the chest, depending on the week. You also have a chance to receive an Ascendant shard, but honestly, this loot payout is pretty lackluster, especially compared to the PvE analog of Trials, which is Grandmaster Ordeals. In Grandmaster Ordeals, if you kill all the champions and earn a platinum finish, you are guaranteed an Ascendant shard with a chance at another one. You get 4 enhancement prisms with a chance at 2 more, and finally, you have a very high chance of getting an exotic armor piece. Trials deserves to be brought up to par with platinum GM completions, and it would mean that when you go flawless, you should receive 1 guaranteed Ascendant shard, you should get a chance at a second shard, and then I think you should get 1 guaranteed exotic armor piece. I feel that making the exotic armor a guarantee is fair, considering that going flawless is often much harder and more time consuming than a platinum GM completion. Now, the next thing I would change is that instead of getting a fixed Adept weapon or armor piece from the chest, you would now instead receive an Adept Trials engram. You would be able to focus this Adept Trials engram into either an Adept weapon or armor piece of your choosing. The final reward that I would add to the Lighthouse chest would be an Adept Trials talisman, which would be your key to unlocking focusing options at the Lighthouse. So let's take a walk through and see how this Lighthouse focusing would work. Unlike the focusing available at the tower with Saint 14, the player would need to unlock all the focusing options, both the Adept Exile gear and the Adept Empress gear. I would make an exception though for any players that have earned the Adept Exile weapons in Season 12 under Bungie's old system, and these players would have the focusing options already unlocked for any of the Adept Exile weapons that they have previously earned. Now, the first row of focusing options would again be free in the sense that it wouldn't require any tokens, but it would require you to first unlock at least 1 Adept Exile weapon or armor piece, and at least 1 Adept Empress weapon or armor piece. As you earn more Adept gear, the pool of these focused engrams would increase. Now, for the weapon-specific and the armor-specific focusing options, the focusing cost would again be 20 tokens. So, say you wanted to farm for an Adept Summoner, you would need to first unlock that focusing option. And to do this, you would need to use an Adept Trials Talisman, which would drop from your first Flawless chest of the week on each character, meaning you could earn up to 3 Adept Trials Talismans in a single week. And now, for the final row of focusing options, you would again have the option to farm out your desired Exile or Empress armor pieces once you've unlocked the focusing options with an Adept Trials Talisman. Now, to make these armor pieces spicy enough to consider pursuing when you've got Adept weapons on the table, these armor pieces would have a plus 20 in 2 different stats and a base stat total of 62 or greater. This would be in line with the revamped dungeon armor coming from the final chest in Pit of Heresy in Season 13, which Bungie has stated will have a plus 16 in 2 different stats and higher stats overall, which I'm assuming means a base stat of around 57 or higher. Since this would be armor acquired from going flawless, arguably the most difficult feat in the game outside of contest mode rating, I think it is perfectly justifiable to take Bungie's concept of spiky distribution, higher stat armor, and crank it up to 11, making it a clear path to acquiring stupid good armor in the slot of your choosing. And under this system, players that go flawless on each character every week would be able to unlock all the focusing options in just a couple of weeks. And under this new system, players who struggle to go flawless and only climb the mountain once or twice in their Destiny career, well, guess what? You would still be able to walk away with some sweet, sweet loot. And most importantly of all, it would be loot that you got to choose, as opposed to the current system where the contents of the flawless chest are the same for everyone in a given week, and may just end up being some dinky armor instead of the weapon that you actually want. Now, there are a couple of quality of life changes that we need to cement the Lighthouse as the true pinnacle PvP experience. The first of these quality of life changes is that repeat flawlesses on a character would always award another Adept Trials engram. It would award 20 more tokens, another guaranteed Ascendant Shard, another guaranteed exotic armor piece, and the chance for a second Ascendant Shard. Because right now, on repeat flawlesses, you can instead receive the 3, 5, or 7 win reward milestone from the flawless chest, as opposed to the flawless reward. Bungie has admitted that this is indeed a bug, but they didn't give a clear timetable on a fix. This is a fix that is badly needed to make Trials a replayable experience on par with Grandmaster ordeals. The second thing we need is that going flawless on a Passage of Confidence, which means 7 wins with 0 losses, would net you 3 Adept Trials engrams at the Lighthouse chest. This feature is actually already in the game, as you get 3 drops from the Lighthouse chest when going flawless on a confidence card now. However, this change was never in any official Bungie patch notes that I've been able to find, and I'd like to lock this in as a feature and not as a bug. This would make going flawless on a confidence card the highest risk to reward activity in the game, as success would net you a godly amount of in-game gear, but a single loss could turn an hour of your time into dust. Destiny needs more content like this that greatly rewards you for doing the most insanely hard activities in the game. And finally, Adept Trials weapons need to be improved and made into true Adept weapons. Adept Trials weapons would have all the benefits I outlined earlier in the video that Pinnacle weapons have, but they would then have 2 more attributes to cement their status as the most coveted loot in the game. These Adept Trials weapons would have a second mod slot that only comprises the Adept mods, and they would have a higher maximum power cap than their Pinnacle counterparts, and be good for 6 seasons total instead of just 4 seasons, truly incentivizing you to run the highest tiers of in-game activities to have the most amount of time with your guns. And with all that said, we've come to the end of another video. Thank you all so much for joining me on another deep dive into one of Destiny 2's core systems. Trials has a special place in my heart. In the last 7 years, the only time I've stepped away from Destiny was in the latter months of the Dark Below. The House of Wolves, and specifically the original Trials of Osiris, brought me back, and I haven't put down Destiny ever since. It was a gut punch when Forsaken came and Trials was taken away for almost 2 years. But it's been an even bigger gut punch watching Trials return and flounder about in its current broken state. If it wasn't for Trials, I would have left Destiny a long time ago, and I'm sure that many of you guys feel the same way. This video, perhaps more than any other I'll ever make, is the one I hope reaches the eyes and ears of the talented developers at Bungie. But before we go, I want you all to know just how much I appreciate your support. The last month has been one of the wildest experiences of my life. 10,000 subs in just a month is... I can't believe it's real. I hope I can keep cranking out content that you all can enjoy. And as always, if you want to support this channel, drop a like, subscribe, and leave a comment down below. Trust me, while I don't respond to every single comment, I read each and every one of them. Keep that awesome feedback coming, and I'll catch you all in the next one. This has been your host, Kujay. Cheers.